Okay, hi guys. We're back. It's Vita Integrated Medicine. I'm Dr. Carolyn George and Leslie Harrington.
Hi, everybody.
Health coach extraordinaire. We're back tonight, and tonight we are speaking about 6 ways that you can save money and still shop for healthy food and get great meals.
Yes, a hot topic. Actually, people ask me about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Just in general, how do I afford? Oh, it's too expensive, and even dealing with one of my favorite populations, the diabetics. You know, and sometimes there's just by statistically and different demographics, a lot of it's just not seemingly or perceived as being affordable. So we're going to try to bust some of those myths tonight and give you some good tips and how to get around that.
Right, because the option, if you're not eating at home and eating these healthy foods, you're eating out at restaurants or you're eating prepackaged foods. And when you start to do that, that alone really boosts up your food dollar when you're looking at the proportion of money that you spend out of your budget for food. So number one thing that we've got is eating at home, okay? So when you're eating at home, you not only know what you're eating, which is key, you can choose organic or not organic, but you know exactly all the ingredients that are in anything that you make. You can control amounts, you can control the different fats and salts and proteins, so you have a lot more control over it. You can then also decide what you're going to eat and plan it over the week, and then that way you can buy things all together. Maybe you just go shopping once a week, get all the things that you need if you know what your recipes are going to be for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It helps so that you can get it cooked on the weekends, and then you have less cooking to do during the week. So there's a lot of advantage to cooking at home. And you have the benefit of getting your best price, because when you're actually making yourself and you're buying these things in amounts and quantities that you're going to use at home, it is much cheaper than anything that you're going to get at the restaurant. Absolutely. Or at somebody that's cooking for you, or out of a box, right? Out of the freezer section of the grocery store.
Definitely, and planning is critical. Not only just to have that, it's those times when you're not prepared, when you're going to slip out and go outside of budget, or you're going to end up eating out, and that's going to set you up for success. And not only that, when you're planning, you're kind of like makes everything easier in your life in general. So you're already got everything kind of set out. It could be once a week, it could be twice a week. It takes much less time to get everything organized and ready for the week than it would be to try to stagger it out throughout the week.
Right, exactly. So that's our number one plea is please, as much as possible, cook at home. And you will just automatically save money. And yes, it's more time consuming, it's more energy consuming, but the benefits you're going to reap are irreplaceable. So really think about that in terms of what is the end game, what's the end result that you want of all of this. And it's usually health and vitality, and you're not going to get that from eating restaurant food.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking a little bit before about families and, cooking for their children and, dealing with kind of that, how do I cook for my kids and how do I cook for myself? And it really doesn't have to have a gap there. It really should be something that you're learning yourself to eat more healthy and clean and dealing with the society we live in today, which is much different than what we grew up in. And we were joking around because we were saying, and when we were kids, it was take it or leave it.
Right.
That was your choice, right? Yeah, there was no short order cook. It wasn't a menu. What's on the menu tonight, So being able to not only plan for yourself, but plan for your family and kind of give the kids those healthy options. And when you're dealing with farmers markets and organics and things like that, like the vegetables and the color and the things that you kind of get their body to start to crave and not so much processed food is going to be critical.
Right, especially if we're talking kids, what they get raised on. I mean, generally they start off with a very bland kind of palate. They don't tolerate much in the way of taste, but the more you expose them to, the more they get used to that, and as they grow older, then they have a bigger repertoire of foods that they like. It's not chicken nuggets and McDonald's. So it really behooves the parent to do the tough thing and have the kids eat the same foods, learn to develop their palate, learn to eat what everybody else is eating. And in the long run, it's going to be great for the kids because they're going to actually know what cooking is. I can tell you that I've got teenage children, and a lot of their friends, not a lot, a few of their friends, I have to be careful, a few of their friends don't really even know about cooking, right? They just think you go to the store and you get a box and you put it in the microwave. And so they're starting off life with a huge disadvantage. They're going to have problems with their health right from the get-go because they're eating all that salty, sugary, trans fatty, junky food. So you're doing your kids a great favor if you do spend the time, teach them how to cook, and cook at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of rolls us into like the cooking for families and how important it is to kind of be able to buy and buy with good, not only intention, but affordably for a large group of people, right? It might be 5, it might be 10, however big your family is, but buying in bulk is something that's available to us. And I think we don't always, we assume it has to be Sam's or Costco, which are very good options, right, and some of the things we'll talk about before, but there's other ways of getting actual discounts and by buying in bulk with case discounts, the 2-for-1 deals,
right. And if you don't have a big enough fridge or freezer, go in with another family and get a whole bunch and then just split it. There's ways to do that. Even if your storage ability isn't huge, then you can still share.
Yeah, I actually do for a place called My Organic Food Club. And they deliver this huge box of vegetables, so much so that it's becoming a little bit overwhelming for me to consume as much as they're delivering. So I'm sharing it, with my boyfriend, my sister, we're all cooking together and stuff. But it's such a great, huge basket that it's worthwhile to do that and go in. So for me, I'm moving it to every other week. But for someone who has the family, like you're forced to eat a lot of color. You get a lot of variation. It's a combination. It's a local place over in Boca, and they bring the box right to your house. So that's a great option for buying in bulk because it's a pretty large amount. Right, and another advantage of doing that kind of thing is that it kind of twists your arm into cooking things that you wouldn't normally cook because you might get,
variety. Some variety that you're not going to usually shop for, and that helps you to be more creative. And Blair had mentioned that when you're cooking at home, that's another great opportunity to be really creative, and you can make these beautiful meals and use different spices and really have a lot of fun and be very creative with your meals. Yeah, so definitely. That's different ways to achieve that. And the variety you're getting, not just, forcing to kind of try new things, but you're getting the nutrient densities. You're getting a ton of different options and good things for you all around. So that not just with that, you can do that same thing with chickens and different types of things. There are delivery places for fish. They'll do frozen packed fish, wild caught. I don't know the name of that place off the top of my head. I don't remember. But we can look at that. I'll put it in the notes. Okay, yeah. No, there's a variety of places that you can, I think, get those fresh foods. And it really depends where you are. Like, we can post places that we know here in some of the notes afterwards. But there's going to be people watching this from Canada, from other places in the States. And so just look locally about where you are, because there's often people that are offering this. Yeah, and the local part of it too kind of ties into what we're going to talk a little bit about the organic and why it's important, why it's not. It is a local farm, so that takes away your transit time, the amount of time it's on a truck, the amount of time it's handled if it's imported, like things like that. Like those are some of the factors when you're choosing produce that you really want to have something that's local. They say it, but the reason for that is kind of all the different things that happen from the time it leaves your farm to the time it gets to your table. What's going on in that process and how much is it exposed to both the temperature and then of course chemicals. Sure. And if they have to harvest it and it's a far distance from you, then they've got to harvest it excuse me, generally when it's green or not fully ripe, and then it ripens on the process. But anything that ripens on the vine or on the tree or on the plant is always going to have many more nutrients and minerals than something that ripens on the way, because it's never going to be as nutritious. Yeah, and actually it's interesting too. You can buy things that are more ripe that are going to be at a better cost also. So you can find in some of the groceries and the farmers markets that something that's going to be more ripe, and those can be actually frozen immediately, and you can capture the nutrients as they are in that best state of their, eating them, right there. So frozen, we may as well jump on frozen versus fresh, because, a lot of questions around that as well. Right. So in terms of quality of the nutrition, we always tend to think of fresh as being the healthiest, but a lot of those fresh things had to be transported. And so, as I mentioned, they're pulled off when they're off the tree or the vine, when they're not actually ripe. And so sometimes getting things in the frozen food section is actually healthier, because those things have generally been able to ripen on the vine or on the tree or on the plant, and so that they have the most nutrient density. And then they're flash frozen, and then they stay in that state until they get to you. So fresh and frozen, depending on what you're cooking. Canned does not have any of those benefits. Canned, the only benefit is longevity, but they add a lot of salt. They're in cans that have BPA in them. Generally, they line the cans with BPA, and they probably weren't really fresh or ripe when they started. So frozen can be a really good alternative, and is much cheaper too. So if you get organic berries, if you get them fresh, they can be an arm and a leg, $5 or $6 for a little container. But if you get them frozen, then it's often about half the price.
Yeah. And then bearing in mind too, going on what you were just talking about with the nutrients. Shoot, no, I lost my train of thought. Let's jump out. We can run into the farmer's market. It'll come to me.
Yeah. So we were just talking about farmers markets are a great source of usually less expensive food, and it's fresh. It's usually local. You do want to always ask them if it's actually organic, if it's local food, because sometimes farmers markets bring things in from Chile or other countries. So you always want to ask, right? Never assume. But they can have some really great fresh produce that's still got some dirt on it, so it can be really healthy for you.
Yeah, good for your gut bacteria.
Good for your gut bacteria.
I did a while back. I did a blog post and I compared and contrast the costs from farmers markets, Whole Foods, our local grocer, which happens to be Publix, and I did Brothers Farmers Market, which is also, I think that's a local Florida type thing.
It's a Florida, yeah.
And at the end of the day, it came down to farmers markets. It was really the most cost effective, with the Whole Foods coming in not a far second. And just remember that when you go into your local grocer, depending on where you are, if you're dealing with a regional chain, you're probably getting someone that doesn't buy a huge volume of organics. So they might have a tiny little section, and in that section, the organics might actually cost more money because they don't buy it super well, because they don't buy the volume as someone like Whole Foods or now Amazon, that would buy those products. So don't assume because it's your local grocer that it's going to be less expensive to buy organic within that grocer. It could be better off to go to one of these specialty places, and you're still going to actually save money. With that, why is it important we keep talking about organic? What does that really mean to you, and does it have to be organic? So it's a heavy lift weighted thing. It's a rabbit hole. We could probably talk all night about organics, but staying away from getting too in depth about GMOs and pesticides and things like that. How would you answer that?
Right. So when you're thinking organic versus not organic, so everything about 50 years ago was organic because there wasn't all the fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, all the rest of the chemicals that we put on food. But in the last many years, we've been using a lot more of these chemicals. And so anything now that's grown without using the pesticides and herbicides, and there's certain fertilizers, there's a certain level of chemicals that are allowed, but they have to be more seen in nature versus more synthetic. And so if you're trying to go for something that is more natural, that is grown without the benefit of all of these things, generally they tend to be a little bit smaller, but they don't come with all these chemicals. It's like the equivalent of spraying Raid on something, right? So there's two streams of thought. One is that everything should be organic, and the other is that it doesn't really matter if it's organic. I kind of tend to go in between. The Environmental Working Group has a great app that they have. It's called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, and they will look at foods in terms of the number of chemicals and the toxicity of the chemicals that are used on them, and rate them for foods that are the Dirty Dozen. Those are dozen foods that you really should not eat unless they're organic. And then the Clean 15 are 15 foods that really doesn't matter if you purchase them organic or not. I mean, you can, but you may want to use your grocery dollar for the Dirty Dozen. And that's because there are really not that many chemicals used on them, so that they're a lot easier. And avocados are a great example of that. You don't, the people that make the produce, they really don't use many chemicals on avocados, for example. But then some people will ask me, okay, well, what does it matter? If you're using this thing that's organic, is it really organic? How do we know that farmer is really treating that food that well? And if it's planted right beside a field that's not organic, aren't you also just getting the drift of all those chemicals over there on it? And yeah, that's true. But if you're getting even half the amount of chemicals that the non-organic foods are being exposed to, then you're still doing your body a service, because all of those chemicals that you're spraying on these things have consequences, and most of them are intended to injure little bacteria or different kinds of plants. So they're not aimed at us, but we have to think about what our mitochondria were originally. The little energy packets in our cells were originally little bacteria. So for example, glyphosate, which is used in Roundup, is meant to hit the little bacteria and not supposed to hurt us. But if you think about how much of us is bacteria, it really still does hurt us. So it's a very complicated issue, and there's certainly lots of information out there. If you want to Google it, there's tons of information on the dangers of bringing all these chemicals in. But nobody has really studied chemicals in combination. Like what happens when you've got glyphosate with a variety of other chemicals that are out there being used. So we really haven't studied it well enough, and I certainly think it's an area that would benefit from studying.
A couple of things I want to tack on there is one is on the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, they judge that based on the pesticide used because of the attraction of the actual crop. So don't assume if something has kind of a thicker shell that it's particularly more safe. Like you can have sweet potatoes at one season, sweet potatoes were on one list and potatoes were on the other. So what would make one attract more bugs than the other? So remember to actually look at the list and don't kind of assume and just think logically. You would think, oh, well, this has skin on it. So it's less likely, because it's not always the case.
Right.
So keep an eye. They have a little wallet thing that you can print up and put in your wallet, and it and it changes. It's actually
they do it every
seasonal.
year.
Yeah.
And they reassess.
And then, to Dr. George's point, the chemicals are designed to kill the brain, the endocrine system, or the reproductive system of the bug, or the neurological cells. So that is some of that is passing on to us, period. You are what you eats, and so with it, same with if an animal's unhealthy, eating a plant that's been chemically sprayed and things like that. And like I said, not to get crazy on GMOs, which we could do a great show on that actually.
Right.
But glyphosate and things like that are just, it's an important topic, and we are guinea pigs really at the end of the day, because they don't do studies on humans because it's not ethical.
Right.
So
but they're doing studies on
and we're not close enough
to
to rats for them to say that, well, that's not human, So at the end of the day, we're kind of the walking guinea pigs. So just bear in mind, it does take many, many, many years before the truth comes out. I mean, it took 40 years for them to say smoking was dangerous.
Right.
So just, pay attention to what's going on in our environment that we didn't have to worry about in the past.
Before, yeah. So that's kind of our shortened version of that piece. Now, the other thing that we wanted to mention that is helpful in terms of trying to make that dollar stretch, to use some what we call filler foods. And we don't mean by that bagels and bread and stuff like that, but more foods that are going to help you feel full, like sweet potatoes, wild rice, quinoa. So those are all, and of course, healthy fats. So your olives, your nuts, your nut butters.
Yeah, those are like a little bang for a big buck, right? Like you get a lot out of fats are going to satiate you. They're going to satiate you longer. And then, of course, fiber. So adding additional fiber without necessarily having to eat a ton of vegetables and things like that, which you should be eating anyway, but adding in like some flax or from some chia, that's going to kind of just give you that full factor, and that's a general rule, not just for people that are looking to be more conservative spending. It's good to keep with, portion control and just regular, diet advice.
And I'm always holding up the banner for fiber. Fiber is your untold friend. So fiber is a way to avoid diabetes, it's a way to avoid high cholesterol, it's a way to avoid overweight, it's a way to avoid cancer, and it is an unsung hero.
Critical.
So fiber really is key. You need a good 35 to 40 grams every day. So make sure that you're eating fiber, and that's nuts and seeds and your veggies, all that roughage. Some raw, some cooked, are all important to get in your diet every single day.
Yes, absolutely. And Blair's asking, how do they get their data to support the claims that they make? I'm guessing he means Monsanto. Again, that's a much bigger topic to dive into, and we should have a show on GMOs to really educate on that. Their data, again, is on my rats. So their claim is basically that, and the intention is not to let's like put this stuff out there to, take out the human race. The intention is to save crops from failing. It's to, when we have freezes in the winter, to not have an entire, to be commercial farmers and have this massive way of producing food. And so that's the way the government's gonna kind of want to present it, and right. It's just that, again, a lot's unknown. It's their research is done on rats, not humans, and again, there's a certain amount that would be considered safe, and I do air quotes because we don't know what's safe. So right. That again, we'll touch on that another time, but they do their research is coming from non-human. Right. But to go on to what you were saying about the fiber, so and the other thing is superfood greens. So even though those can be costly to find a real quality superfood green, they're super rich in nutrients, and you can drink that, and not only are you going to have full and satiety, you're going to get vitamins and nutrients you need. So I recommend that type of thing for people with tummy issues. If they're not digesting well, it's going to be a way to kind of get your body to get what it needs without spending a huge amount of money and without eating the wrong types of foods.
Mm-hmm. Right, and you just have to look at the cost of it, because you maybe can make your own superfood greens,
yes,
even less expensively, but then you need the blender and you need to do some things with it. So whenever you're doing it yourself, generally you're going to save money. So just kind of going back to that idea that if you buy something in the fresh produce section, it's going to cost a certain amount. If you go over a little step and they started to chop it up for you, they're going to increase the price. Yes. If you buy it in a package with something else, the price is going to be increased even further. So the more of that work you can do yourself.
I call that the cost of my lazy.
Yeah, the cost of my lazy is exactly right. Yeah.
I'm always like, I'm lazy. Yeah. Throw that in there.
Yeah. So don't be lazy. Chop it up and you'll save money.
Yeah, it's like a veggie tray. You can buy that thing for $20, or you could buy a couple vegetables for about
it just
$7.
Blows my mind how much they charge for that. Yeah. I'd rather cut it up myself.
So I like the discount grocers is a great topic too. This is kind of new, I think, in our world, because right. I don't think people realize how much you can actually purchase online, and this actually extends way beyond eating healthy, but bringing about affordable products in home cleaning supplies and some of your skincare products. So the stuff that's a kind of non-produce is really, really great to look at. VitaCost is one of my favorite. I've done some compares with them in Thrive Market as well. Thrive Market has great intention. They have a great story. They do a lot for charity. They actually allow, they give away memberships to people who are in need. But Thrive Market is a big one, and VitaCost doesn't have a membership, but the Thrive does.
Right. But it's not very high. I think I belong to Thrive, and I think it was $20.
For the year, right? It's not a lot.
Yeah, it's not a lot. And I've definitely made my money back on that one.
Yeah. So they're both super, Sam's and Costco are offering a lot more in the organic area now. And they probably do buy pretty well. They're buying in bulk to begin with. Right. So definitely check out the discount grocers. And then might as well jump over to coupons and discounts in general, because I think that we're very... the old days was like cutting it out of the newspaper and walking around with now it's all about finding stuff online. It's about doing your homework. And I think we really got away from that for certain, some people are probably still really good about that. But I think Whole Foods, you wouldn't necessarily think. I think a lot of people have a misinterpretation of what their intention is, and maybe it's overpriced, and maybe Amazon will change that. But they do have flyers that you can print up online, or they even usually have them in the store. But they have weekly specials, and then they have coupons. So being aware of what's coming is really good too. Like
you can plan your diet around that. Plan your weekly menu.
Yeah, if you know next week the chicken's going to be $5 per pound off, then really you want to wait and invest in that time and in those coupons. And the same with Trader Joe's, and Lucky's Market had some stuff on there when I looked them up. I printed up a couple. So this is Whole Foods. See, they have little things that'll tell you how much you're saving and when the deal is from. So this particular one is the deals that they have online right now, and then they had a thing that had a range, like it was a week period of time that the deals were going on. And then the fresh market, from what the last I looked too, they have a buy one get one free Tuesday on organic
BOGO.
chicken.
Yeah.
So BOGOs are big, and again, if you don't have the space, it's worth investing to do it with your friends. You know, grab a neighbor. And again, they have pages and pages of coupons. That one's under the fresh market. So check that out. I know Trader Joe's sends out a thing in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more than I think I would have ever assumed that those types of places do have, and they do.
Right, exactly. So does anybody have any questions out there? Anything or other suggestions? I think we have covered the key things that we wanted to talk about, with kind of really the top of the ladder being cooking at home. That, like I said, I think I've said it a few times tonight, is really the best thing that you can do. Saving money never goes along with eating in a restaurant or eating even at fast food places, because if you save a few dollars by just spending 99 cents on your meal, you are going to lose money in the future because you're going to be in the hospital, you're going to be on medications, you're going to lose efficiency at work, you're going to lose vitality. So you might win in the short term, but it's never in the long term.
Okay, so this is the best question, because eggs are the most poorly marketed. I guess actually I say poorly marketed. They're probably in their mind the best marketed, because they have more claims on them than any other type of product you can buy in a store. An egg carton probably has 10 different claims, most of them unnecessary. So the best eggs to eat, free range and cage free, not so much. I would go with pasture raised. So you want to look, cage free means that they're all in a secluded area. If you picture cages and you just lifted the cages up and took them away, they'd still be clustered together. They just don't have bars between them. Mm-hmm. And then a free range, you might have a teeny area that has an open part in the barn that they're at, but Mr. Chicken back here may never see the light of day, you know, because they can't get them out there. Whereas pasture raised or they're kind of out like you would picture them. They're out kind of free roaming, and they're eating worms, which are not vegetarian. So when they say vegetarian fed, they're not really supposed to be vegetarian. So that's really not an important claim so much, because if you're buying organic, you're going to kind of capture the importance of what the chicken's eating. And organic is really important with chickens and pasture raised, because the environment that they're in is critical to their hormone levels. So the other claim that you'll see on eggs is that they're hormone free. Again, against the law, eggs and chicken cannot have hormones. So that's just a silly claim, because it doesn't mean anything. But it is important for you to realize that chickens have their own hormones, and they are very intense when they're in those environments. And that's why it is key to make sure that you're getting eggs and chicken from the right source.
But I think they can give chickens hormones to make their breasts extra big, like growth hormone and that type of thing?
No added hormones are allowed by U.S. law.
So I guess that's the question, is what does added hormones mean? Like,
well, because they're saying they're natural, they do have a lot of natural hormones.
Okay. Because I always wonder when I see those big, huge chicken breasts, it's like, okay, there's something not right here.
They're pumped with a bunch of sodium in water, too. I've seen them do that on a show. Mm-hmm. They literally pump them and they blow up to like, it's all like processed.
Yes.
It's like fillers.
Well, and they can also actually use meat glue in chicken and pork and other meats. So if it's in a skin, they probably haven't, but they can take bits and pieces of meat and it sticks it together, and they can shape it to be whatever shape they want it to be, and it can look like a steak or like a drumstick or like whatever, but it's
not so much.
Not so much, right? Exactly, not so real.
Yeah, they even mark on the carton, they'll put a star next to the hormone free, and then they'll say down at the bottom, by law, you're not allowed to have hormones, right there on the same thing. So I think marketing for marketing's sake, they want to get you to think the more that they claim, the better. And my thing is, the more that you see on a package that claims, you probably want to go as far away from that as you can.
Well, just in general.
In general.
That's, right. Anything that's packaged is going to be less healthy than something that's not packaged, that's just in its kind of natural state.
Anything with a barcode.
Anything with a barcode. Anything that says it's natural and healthy probably isn't. So again, buying on the outside of the grocery store is what I always tell my patients. On the inside, everything's packaged in some way, shape, or form. On the outside, you've got your deli, you've got your fresh produce, you've got your meats. So try to get things that look as close to they look like in nature.
In real life,
when they were alive. when they were in the field or in the pasture.
And Jen asks about milk. Similar topic as chicken when it comes to the pasture raising, except cows can have hormones, and they can, they're not just hormones, they're given antibiotics, which chickens are too, but you really want to make sure that you're drinking milk that comes from a healthy cow. So really the free range, I mean, if we could get into a whole reason why dairy might not be always great for everybody as well. So, but as far as milk, if you are going to have milk, there are a lot more organic grass-fed, pasture-raised cow milks out there now. The marketing people are getting on to this transition. There's a lot of paradigm shifting when it comes to eating healthier, and people are becoming more aware and they're becoming more health conscious. And the marketing people know that. So they're making things green. They're putting all natural on that, which means nothing, by the way.
Natural means nothing.
It's not regulated. It's just it's like
organic is as weak a title as that might be. At least you have to meet certain criteria. Natural means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and organic is kind of like that umbrella.
Yeah.
Organic's going to capture that it's non-GMO, that it's got like no herbicides, no this, like that's going to kind of give you those. That had a great visual on this one, so it has checks. Where organic is kind of checks everything, and then non-GMO checks a few, and then you kind of go through. Non-GMO is printed on a lot of things now, which is great because legally they're not required to put that on there, where they are in other countries. They're actually very explicit about what's in their food versus the U.S. is not. But again, if you're eating something that's non-GMO on the label, it's probably something you want to reconsider if it's got that, barcode, or if it's processed anyway.
Right. And we don't know that GMO hurts us, other than I'd say glyphosate, which I think the information is pretty clear. But GMO is, and writing non-GMO is a way so we can track that. Because if we knew for sure they all hurt us, then we wouldn't be able to have GMO foods. But we don't know because we're not following it. And so we need to study that, and the only way to study it is to label it, and so you can know what you're eating and know what you're being exposed to. So
yeah, and it comes in many forms too.
Right.
So understanding GMOs, it's not simply they're spraying stuff. It's stuff the way that they're actually implanting it in the cellular structure of the plant. So it's coming from the inside out. It's not just simply crops are being sprayed. There's a lot of things that go into the GMO process. So.
Right.
Gluten.
And what about gluten? So I'm not sure. What about where to buy it? What is it bad? I'm not quite clear on the question. So if you just want to clarify that, we'll attack it because we like to talk about gluten.
Yeah, and antibiotics are bad. Yeah, antibiotics are unfortunately very common in most conventional meats and meat dairy.
Way too common, right?
Yeah, and antibiotics are similar. Actually, they're probably worse because in cows, the reason they're giving them antibiotics is because they fed them grain, which does damage to their intestinal tract. And at that point,
they're not grain eaters.
They're not meant to eat grain.
Right.
Yeah, so at that point, then they're getting them all this corn and this stuff to fatten them up. And, by then they get an infection and then they get the antibiotics. So by the time, that milk and that meat comes to you, it's kind of, you want to wonder what you're putting in your mouth.
Right. And so Diana was wondering if gluten is bad for you. And that really depends on you. So for some people, gluten, which by the way is a string of amino acids, it's a whole bunch of what we call valine. That's a particular amino acid that comes in a chain, and we don't have enzymes that can cleave it. So we can't break it down. And so for some people, celiacs for example, their gut gets exposed to that and they get very inflamed, and it causes a whole host of issues, not just with their gut, but with their brain and a variety of other body symptoms. But some people can eat gluten and have no problem. However, they have studied gluten, and Dr. Fasano is a really good researcher with this, and all of us, he's studied groups of celiacs, not celiacs, and non-celiac gluten sensitivity people, and everybody gets a little transient loss of the zonulin, they get a little intestinal permeability, and then most of us heal it right back again within minutes. But people who are celiac will not heal very well, and people that are starting to have some issues, and celiac, you're not born celiac, you often develop it over a lifetime for a variety of reasons. So people that are starting to have some issues will take longer and longer to heal, and ultimately when they're full-blown celiac, then they're really not healing and they've got this intestinal permeability issue, and then they
Kind of
can't
wreaks
have
havoc
it.
on your body, yeah.
Then it really wreaks havoc. So I would say it's not a poison, but some people can't tolerate it and some people can. So you have to figure out what your level of tolerance is and eat what makes you feel good, but makes you feel vital. And
Yeah.
if you don't feel good after you eat it, I wouldn't eat it.
Absolutely.
If you feel great, then eat it.
And then on the flip side, if you feel great, but you have like an autoimmune condition or you have some other things, it is a very common antagonist for someone with, you know, again, gluten, total topic.
Yeah.
But
we could talk about 5 hours on that.
everything that we talk about is always going to be very specific to individual. And I think we're seeing more and more that there's no cookie cutter way of doing things, and there's no perfect diet for everybody in the world. There's no, it's got to be really specific to the person and how they feel when they eat certain foods. And you know, there's never going to be a time that it's just going to be everybody should do the same thing. It really isn't. It's learning these types of topics that we're talking about that's going to allow you to make the better choices for yourself.
Right.
You know?
Experiment. You're that N of 1, and you see what makes you feel good, what makes you feel vital, and what doesn't, and then stick with it.
Yeah, and I think there's always like two sides. Like if I could give you a complete defense for one thing, but then I can tell you exactly why I would absolutely never touch it in another, because there are factors that are both important. It's that's what you need to understand to make the best decision for yourself.
Yeah. So with that, we've now gone a little over time, but thank you everybody for sticking in, and I hope you make your shopping dollar go very, very broad, wide, well spent, and get lots of those good foods and start cooking at home and create your masterpieces and feel healthy and good the next week.
Yes, and thank you for tuning in. We missed our 1 week last week, and we are back. So bring on some subjects that you want us to cover. We have kind of some planned out, so we're excited about the next few weeks.
Yep, so tune in, and until then, have a great week.
Have a great week, guys.
Take care, guys.
Bye.